Hello and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guest on this next interview. Armenia is marking Republic Day with a military parade just days before a pivotal parliamentary election that could shape the country's geopolitical future. Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan is deepening ties with the United States and Europe while relations with Moscow continues to deteriorate. Against the backdrop of Vladimir Putin's participation in the Eurasian Economic Forum in Kazakhstan and growing regional tensions, questions are mounting over Armenia's place between Russia and the West. Joining us today on TVP World is Grigol Julukhidze, Associate Professor at Caucasus University. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Good morning.
It's a lot to unpack here, but kicking things off, can you help us understand what message was Nikol Pashinyan trying to send with this year's Republic Day military parade just days before the election?
There might be several signals that Mr. Pashinyan is right now sending to its voters. First of all, to increase the visibility of Armenian forces and increase the national pride after the catastrophic defeat in the Karabakh war. Apart from that, Mr. Pashinyan is trying to create a state, or at least the basis for the state, which will look like European, and this is very important in this political game when the stakes are extremely high. And another issue might be the attempt to consolidate those Armenians who believe that the country is not defeated, at least psychologically and morally. And the combination of these factors create an important signal if we try to understand the calculus of Mr. Pashinyan and the significant impact on the decision-making process in the context of upcoming parliamentary elections.
All right, so with that context in mind, can you also help us understand what this is going to mean geopolitically? As we understand, Pashinyan seems to be a leader that is very much more pro-Western than a lot of his competitors.
Well, first of all, we have to understand that June 7, 2026 marks the first regularly scheduled parliamentary election since 2017. And there are several factors, and we have to understand these factors in order to analyze the current trends in the Armenian politics. Several factors that define the political landscape of this country. First of all, this is, as I have mentioned, the 2020 Karabakh war and its unresolved aftermath, because no issue dominates Armenian political consciousness more than the 44-day war war of 2020, in which Azerbaijani forces with direct Turkish support recaptured the overwhelming majority of Karabakh, and Russia's brokered ceasefire imposed terms widely perceived in Armenia as a capitulation. And the full fall of the remaining Armenian-controlled enclave in September 2023, which displaced approximately 120,000 ethnic Armenians, deepened the political wound. And Pashinyan's decision to pursue peace with Azerbaijan under a framework brokered by the United States in August 2025 has become the single most divisive political question in the campaign. Another issue, of course, is the geopolitical realignment between 2022 and 2026. Armenia has undergone a geopolitical reorientation without precedent. Yerevan suspended active participation in the Collective Security Treaty Organization, allowed the Russian military base mandate to lapse, initiated the EU membership application process, signed a strategic partnership agreements with the United States, and formally applied to exit the Eurasian Economic Union. And this transformation has occurred against the backdrop of political ambivalence, while Pashinyan's government has pursued an accelerated Western integration agenda. Polling from 2025 revealed that roughly 60% of Armenians still prefer Russian involvement in the country's security architecture. Support for EU membership, which briefly exceeded 51% in January 2025, slipped to approximately 37% by mid-year, reflecting public anxiety about the pace of the break from Moscow and continued energy and trade dependencies on Russia. That's why the rivalry between the civil contract parties, Strong Armenia Alliance, and Prosperous Armenia will be extremely challenging. Of course, we cannot figure out internal and external risk factors, which I hope we'll discuss a bit later.
Right. Let's actually touch upon it a little bit, because you mentioned public anxiety when it comes to Russia, which is quite sensitive within the country. I do want to point to some of the most recent developments, seeing some Russian drones straying into NATO territory and hitting Romania, causing some death. Do you think that this would change some strategic calculus or a political kind of understanding within Armenia? Do you think that this will stir up some of the anxiety there?
In my opinion, yes, it will, at least partially, because the main calculus of the Kremlin right now in regards to Armenian society is to create terror. And that's why they're widely using information operations, like creating the myth of the upcoming confrontation, war with Russia, because if, according to their narrative, if the Pashinyan's administration remains in the power, the war, at least limited conflict with Moscow, is inevitable. Apart from that, Moscow is manipulating the facts related to bilateral relations, that the life and daily costs will dramatically increase in case Pashinyan wins these elections, because of a very high level of economic attachment of Yerevan to Moscow in terms of energy cooperation, import-export, etc. And of course, these issues define the public moods, at least partially. And add to this element vote buying and administrative resource misuse from and by the Prosperous Armenia, pro-Russian oligarch who has a lot of financial resources in this regard. Also, we cannot ignore the fact that the Armenian Apostolic Church is indirectly involved in the process, because the Church's intervention has introduced an unpredictable wild card into campaign dynamics. Tensions between the Pashinyan government and the Catholicos of all Armenians have escalated over constitutional amendments, the deposition of Karabakh displaced persons, and the government's management of the 2023 crisis. And the peace process variable, because the Armenian Azerbaijan peace framework brokered by the Trump administration remains unsigned at the time of this interview. And Yerevan has publicly indicated readiness to sign, while Baku continues to introduce additional conditions, which is destabilizing for Pashinyan's political ranking.
Right. Now, speaking of that economic attachment you pointed to, usually, traditionally, economic factor plays a very big role in elections. Do you think that by pursuing this more combative stance with Russia, Pashinyan is putting his political career at risk, seeing that, well, Russia is already threatening turning out of gas or any other economic and political levers that they can pull?
Well, I would say that he's a gambler, at least partially, because he's taking a lot of risks, because Russia, unfortunately, still remains a very significant player in Armenia and in the South Caucasus region. And I remind you that in Armenia, Russia has 2 military bases, very strong spy networks, and already mentioned economic leverage. That's why the combination of these aspects create at least the I would say limited ability to predict what's going to happen, because Russia has already tested in many countries its operational capacities to undermine national security, even of stronger countries, and in this regard, Armenia remains extremely vulnerable. But from my personal point of view, I would say that Mr. Pashinyan fully relies on the support of those Western Armenians who still live abroad, and in this regard, he has a huge advantage, especially in France and Lebanon, in the United States of America, and the endorsements that are coming from Washington and Brussels. And I remind you that a couple of weeks ago, there was a EU-Armenia summit in Yerevan, and it was a very, let's say, significant endorsement to his re-election.
All right, last but not least, if Russia were to pursue these economic levers or even turning off the gas, is there any chance where some of these Western partners that you formerly mentioned will be able to help relieve some of these economic stress? Is that what Pashinyan is counting on?
In this regard, Armenia is even more limited than Georgia because of its geographical constraints and its geopolitical location, because the only window, at least very well tested to the west for Yerevan, remains Georgia, which is in this situation is in a complicated relations with the West. That's why I would say that there might be some factual support from the West, at least on the legislative level, and visa liberalization for the holders of Armenian passports, which will be a huge psychological benefit and practical benefit for Pashinyan. But when it comes to tangible economic support, I would be very prudent in this regard because I don't see any serious perspectives in this direction.
Does seem like a pretty tough gamble going forward. But in the meantime, thank you so much for your input and insight. Really appreciate it, and thanks for being with us. Cheers.
My pleasure.
And thank you for tuning into this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to DVB World.